Hello everyone. If you like this audiobook and want to listen to more, please consider subscribing. And if you like this video, like it as well, that it enjoy.
The man behind the mascot, Pepsiman's Pav, looking at a monster and realizing you are staring into a mirror is a very specific agony. Rampage roared, Gwarg. It was a guttural shriek of unadulterated suffering that vibrated through the cracked pavement of downtown Chicago. He was a 9-foot behemoth, permanently trapped inside a cursed, rusted shell of heavily modified power armor with massive iron maces instead of hands. Make it stop, a distorted voice rasped, echoing from the grated plate on his face. Please, it burns, the metal burns. I knew the horrifying truth of his existence, because he was just like me. He was a man who had been forcefully welded into a cage of his own making with no way to eat, no way to sleep, and barely any air to breathe. A prisoner in his own body, lashing out at a world that had completely forgotten the human being suffocating inside the machine. He's a broken soul, just like me, I thought. Before I could even attempt to reach out and offer him a refreshing beverage, Rampage swung his massive mace. Get away from me, he shrieked in blind panic. The rusted metal collided squarely with the logo on my chest as the force of it lifted me off my feet, sending my metallic body flying backward through the air. I crashed violently through the metal doors of a parked delivery truck. The impact bent my metallic spine nearly in half as I sank deep into a sea of cardboard boxes and aluminum cans. My vision flickered, blurring into a spiral of white as my body went numb, but my mind remained agonizingly awake. It is a terrifying realization when you finally figure out that hell is not made of fire and brimstone. Hell is a lack of a mouth when you desperately need to scream for help. Before this accursed existence, my name was Satoru Shujinko. I was just another faceless cog in the corporate machine, drowning in debt, working a dead-end Naneto 5 job where my boss did not even know my name. I was once a scientist who made a terrible, terrible mistake when I accepted the cursed holy Pepsi into my heart. I was a fool who thought a magical artifact would finally give me an edge in a world that was crushing me to death. I thought I could be a hero and live out the fantasy of millions. Instead, it warped my flesh and bone into this metallic skin. I was reduced to a corporate slave in the truest, most cosmic sense, bound to the whims of PepsiCo itself, forever compelled by the overwhelming urge to deliver goddamn soda. When John first summoned me, I was so happy I could have danced right then and there. I had a purpose. I finally had someone to serve who might actually look at me and see a person instead of a walking gag. I materialized in my classic pose, holding out an ice-cold bottle, eager to please. Pepsi, I offered, my heart swelling with hope. Master John had just stared at me, but his eyes were dead and exhausted instead of the hopeful ones I imagined. Are you fucking kidding me? A corporate mascot, he had muttered, aggressively rubbing his temples in disappointment. I wasted a goddamn roll on a walking trashgear vending machine. I had swallowed the familiar lump of disappointment and told myself it was just a bad first impression. It's not like Master's going to abandon me, right? So Master seems to have abandoned me, I thought as I found myself dumped at the Global Defense Agency. Director Cecil Stedman became the poor chump my master seems to have dumped me on. I walked the sterile halls of the Pentagon, surrounded by scientists and soldiers who looked at me with clinical interest instead of the usual fear. In my old world, after I'd delivered their drinks, people would look at me like a monster and desperately want me to leave so they could enjoy their Pepsi in peace. It is my job to do a Pepsi run always, all the time. It was my only reason to exist. But here, people took an interest in me and put me in machines to test my limits. After a long session of tests, they found out my strength was pretty impressive, something about enhanced strength, durability, speed, and more details. I couldn't catch all the details because someone nearby ran out of Pepsi, so I made a quick delivery run. But when I came back, the lab was in mayhem as people were buzzing around in worry. How the fuck did he get past the perimeter, Donald? Cecil frantically yelled, pinching the bridge of his scarred nose. He bypassed $3 billion of security infrastructure, walked straight through a reinforced blast door without triggering a single alarm, and just handed Agent Reeves a soda. How is that even possible? I'm not sure, sir, Donald said, adjusting his glasses. Kaisen said it was some Toon Force bullshit. Just put him in the testing room and see how hard he hits. We might be able to use him. I tried to explain that I just had to make a Pepsi delivery, but my mouth could only say one word. Pepsi. After that, They ran a few more tests involving Pepsi and came to a conclusion that I had some sort of reality-altering power. As long as it's about delivering a Pepsi, I could do whatever is needed to deliver it, as long as it's in the real world. When they called Master to ask about this, he just dismissively said something about a toon force and cut the phone, saying he had some important business to discuss with his butler. Huh, Master, got another summon already. Wonder if he made a better first impression than me. No one saw me as a person. I was just an anomaly. A copyright infringing liability that they were afraid would get them sued to hell by PepsiCo. Then one day, Cecil decided to utilize his new asset. He sent me to the tryouts for the new Guardians of the Globe. These heroes in their costumes made me think maybe I won't be a monster if I had the title of a hero attached to my name. Look at them, Cecil had told me, pointing through the one-way glass at the unruly teen team and the potential roster of heroes. They are a goddamn mess. Arrogant, incoordinated, and green as grass. I need you to go in there and play the monster. Give them a villain to unite against, or they will die on their first real mission. He leaned in closer, his scarred face inches from my featureless face. Of course, if you don't want to disappoint your John, you'll do exactly as I say. No, I still need to correct my first impression. I'll do it. I'll be the villain to be the hero. So, I swallowed my pride, buried the naive Satoru Shujinko deep down and became the threat they needed. I watched the two-punch man's jaw shatter as I shoved a can of cool Pepsi down his throat with more force than necessary. The bone cracked like kindling, and blood mixed with cola as he choked. I felt sorry for the guy, so I made sure to at least use a Diet Pepsi can. Pepsi, I whispered mournfully. Since that day, the alienation was suffocating. I walked the halls of the GDA, and the young heroes parted like the Red Sea whenever I approached. I'd finally found a team of peers, but my own actions had turned me into the office pariah. Keep that freak away from me, Rexplode had muttered in the cafeteria, pulling Duplicate away from my table. But scaring them did wonders for the new Guardians, Unity. Even that bratty punk Rex walked the line in front of me now, his cockiness replaced with caution. One of my colleagues thought differently, as he would ask me to meet occasionally. You carry a heavy burden, my metallic friend, Sebastian had said one evening, gracefully sipping tea while I stood silently in the corner. In my world, there were beings of great power who communicated much like you do. A restricted voice does not mean an empty soul. He set down his teacup and looked directly at me. You are a warrior of Master John's court, and I am honored to share this space with you. Even though technically I was his senior Sebas, Sir Sebas was like a kind older friend always ready to talk to me, even though all I could reply was, Pepsi. He would tell me about his training sessions with our master, how he was trying to wean John off the adrenaline rush of gacha rolls through brutal physical conditioning. Hearing about Master getting his ass beat by Sebas was oddly satisfying. Then came that awful day when the new Guardians voted me out for a rescue mission back in Chicago. I was sitting alone in the GDA break room, staring at my silver hands and wondering if Coca-Cola's curse was less restrictive than Pepsi's, when I heard a very soft whisper echoing in my mind from miles away. It was Sir Sebas. Moss, Tear, the delirious, dying whisper echoed across the psychic bond all familiars shared with their master. I need a drink. I need Pepsi. Pepsi. I gasped aloud, my entire body jolting upright. I did not think I couldn't afford to, as I grabbed the coldest bottle of Pepsi from the breakroom fridge and ran. I broke the sound barrier within 3 steps, leaving sonic booms in my wake and stomping craters into the Pentagon's concrete courtyard as I crossed state lines at impossible speeds. I arrived just in time to see my master reaching out in pure despair, trying desperately to save a bisected Sebastian while the massive, Whiteford battle beast loomed over them both. I wanted to scream Sebas's name. I wanted to yell for my friend to hold on, that help was here. But my cursed vocal cords forced the branding slogan out instead. Pepsi, motherfucker. I took a wild swing with the bottle at Battle Beast's smug face. The alien swatted me away like a nuisance insect, and the bottle shattered mid-arc. But I saw it happen. The droplets of soda flew through the air, sparkling like tiny stars in the evening sun. The sticky liquid coated the circuitry of the alien's wrist device, short-circuiting it as sparks flew. Forcefully teleporting him and an injured Sebas, who was using all his will and life force, grabbed onto the beast and dragged him into the portal, taking the monster away from Master. Saving John's life with his last breath. Later, after the reality of what had just happened, Master John sat alone in the rubble, completely broken. I walked up to him and patted his blood-soaked back. "I'm sorry, Pepsi Man," he murmured, his voice raw and broken. "I know you two were close. Sebas always spoke highly of you. Said you had a good heart trapped in that shell." He choked on a wet laugh that sounded more like a sob. "Shit, I really fucked up, didn't I? First impression and all that. You deserved better than being tossed aside like trash." I looked at him, and my metallic heart shattered into a million jagged pieces. I wanted to speak. Hell, I wanted to violently tear off this silver mask and scream the words rattling inside my trapped mind. The only person that understood me is dead. The people I thought I could finally befriend fear me. Every time I see hope, it's ripped away from me. Because I am useless. I can't speak, I can't fight the impulse. Please, Master, tell me what I should do. Everything I try to do on my own ends horribly. I want someone to tell me who to save, what to like, what to hate, who to trust, what missions to go on, what to joke about when I'm sitting entirely alone in the break room. What not to joke about when the new guardians look at me like I'm a freak. I want someone to tell me how to live this life, Master, because so far, I've been getting it so wrong. My own desperate choices got me trapped in this faceless metal shell. That's what familiars like me need. A master who just tells us how to do it. Who gives us orders and tells us what the point of all this suffering is at the end of the shift. I was promised I would be more than this. And yet, all I can do is hand out a can of sugary water in a war zone. I traded my humanity so I wouldn't have to feel like a failure anymore, but nothing has changed. So just tell me what to do. Tell me what to do, Master. But I could not say any of that. The corporate curse held my tongue hostage as I could only show my compassion the only way my branding allowed me to. So I did what I did best and offered him an ice-cold bottle of Pepsi. Pepsi, and to my surprise, my broken master choked out a tired laugh. "Yeah," he said, taking the bottle with trembling hands. "Yeah, I could use a Pepsi." The memory faded, snapping me violently back to the present. I groaned, pushing myself up from the crushed metal floor of the delivery truck Rampage had thrown me into. I wiped the sticky, dark liquid from my hands and looked down at the crushed red cans scattered all around me. I went into shock as I realized my entire silver and blue body was drenched in Coca-Cola. The cloying, inferior, overly sweet syrup dripped from my pristine metallic shell-like sewage. It was the ultimate, unforgivable branding violation. The disrespect of the situation bypassed my depression entirely and instead ignited a spark of white-hot rage deep within my core. Pepsi and Coca-Cola had been rivals for over a century. Wars had been fought, markets had been conquered, and taste tests had been rigged. And this motherfucker just threw me into a truck full of the enemy's product. "Pepsi," I roared, the single word carried the weight of 1,000 curses in a lifetime of pent-up aggression. I stepped out of the ruined truck, my silver body glowing with a blinding, effervescent blue light. Rampage charged at me again. "Die, just let me die," he shrieked, swinging his rusted maces blindly in the air. I did not dodge and simply raised a single finger, pointing it at Rampage. The Coca-Cola cans beneath Rampage violently erupted. A hyperpressurized geyser of pure, ice-cold subquality cola exploded upward with the force of a fire hydrant. The force of the swage-like drink hit him like a freight train, blasting the 9-foot behemoth straight into the air like a discarded toy. I blurred into motion, my enhanced speed kicking in as I moved at Mach 3. I appeared above him in midair and summoned a giant, solid construct of a classic Pepsi Black weighing impossibly more than physics should allow, and slammed it directly into his armored chest plate. Clang! I can't breathe. Rampage choked as the rusted armor that had trapped him groaned and buckled under the absurd pressure. Good. I did not stop as I rained a flurry of high-speed, silver-fisted strikes upon his shell, each punch accompanied by the loud, satisfying hiss of an opening soda can. My fists moved so fast they created sonic booms, each impact denting the armor further. Pepsi, Pepsi, Pepsi. With a final, devastating double AXE fist, I sent Rampage crashing back into the cratered street. The impact spider webbed the asphalt for 20 feet in every direction. The pavement cracked, dust exploded upward, the monster was finally unconscious. I landed softly on the pavement, the blue glow fading from my metallic skin. I stood amidst the destruction of the city block, the sound of sirens wailing in the distance. The adrenaline faded, and the familiar, heavy weight of my existence settled back onto my shoulders as I waited for the civilians hiding behind the police barricades to look at me with disgust and fear, whispering about the faceless metal monster. I lowered my heavy head, preparing to clock out and walk away in silence. "Excuse me," a small, trembling voice called out. I turned around only to find a young boy, no older than 10, had slipped past the yellow police tape. He was covered in dust, clutching a battered backpack, looking up at my towering, faceless silver form. He did not look scared. Instead, his eyes were wide with unfiltered awe. Are you the guy from the TV?" the boy asked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "The one who saved the city from the big lion monster?" I stared at him, my metallic body frozen in place. Behind the boy, the crowd of evacuated civilians slowly began to emerge from their hiding spots, staring at the unmoving armor of Rampage. A murmur rippled through the crowd, growing louder by the second. "It is him," a woman whispered, her hands covering her mouth. "He stopped the monster," a police officer said, slowly lowering his weapon. "Pepsi Man," someone cheered from the back. The chant caught on. It spread through the barricades, echoing across the ruined street. It wasn't a mandated corporate jingle I was so used to hearing in commercials. It was no mockery, either. It was a heartfelt roar of gratitude from people who were still alive because of me. "Pepsi Man, Pepsi Man, Pepsi Man." The boy in front of me smiled brightly. Can I have one?" My hands trembled. The crushing despair that had chained my heart finally cracked and fell away like dead skin peeling off. I knelt down, the metal of my knees clicking softly against the concrete, and reached into the boy's backpack, my silver fingers wrapping around an ice-cold can that came out of nowhere. I gently placed the blue and silver can into the boy's small hands. "Pepsi," I said softly. For the very first time since I traded my soul for this metallic skin, the word did not feel like a corporate slogan. It felt like a promise. A single, warm tear rolled down my cheek beneath my faceless visor. I was not a joke. I was not just a gag to be tossed aside. I was a goddamn hero. 57 comments 0 vote. A champion's error. Alan the alien's POV. I opened my single eye and instantly regretted it. An overwhelming, searing itch burned deep within my optic nerve, accompanied by a phantom ache that made my entire skull throb. The last thing I remembered was floating in the cold vacuum of space, cracking a joke to Omni-Man. Then, without a single word of warning, his fist had driven straight through my face. The memory of the squelching crunch of my own eye being pulverized sent a fresh wave of panic through my chest. The terror of being completely outclassed in a fraction of a second made my heart hammer against my ribs. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear my blurry vision. I wasn't in space anymore. Instead, I was suspended in a viscous, brightly glowing green liquid. The fluid was thick enough that I could barely see the outlines of the room outside my confinement. I was trapped like a specimen in a tube. I urgently needed to report back to the coalition of planets. The great Titus needed to know that Earth's champion had gone completely feral. I also needed to see Telia. She was going to be so furious with me for missing our date. Operating on unopen instinct, I balled my fists. My limbs felt wobbly and weak, but I swung anyway. Crash! The thick glass of the pod shattered outward. The green liquid spilled across the floor in a massive wave. I tumbled out, coughing violently and gasping for air as my knees buckled, sending me crashing onto the cold tiles. Too heavy, surprisingly similar voices yelled out in shock from across the room. "Look what you did, you botched duplicate." One voice bellowed. "I specifically told you to use the reinforced polymer for the goddamn tank." But no, the clone always knows best. I looked up, my vision still swimming, trying to make out the blurry presence of two hulking, blue-skinned humanoids. "Me," the other voice shot back immediately. "I am the original faker. Look at your head, you're clearly number 2. And you're the one who miscalculated the fluid density." Quote. "Prisoners, scientists, I couldn't let them keep me here." I forced myself up, lunging forward with a shaky roar. I tackled the nearest blue man, wrapping my arm around his thick neck in a desperate chokehold. "Stand down," I yelled in a raspy voice. "Don't make any sudden movements if you value his life." The other blue man didn't freeze or raise his hands like I expected him to. Instead, he burst into a booming, belly-shaking laugh. He laughed so hard he literally had to wipe a tear from his eye. "Me, value his life? Oh, please, go right ahead." The second blue man wheezed. "Snap his neck. You'd be saving me the trouble of recycling his defective biomass. My God, Mr. Kaisen never told me how funny this orange guy would be." I groaned in frustration and tightened my grip. My vision finally cleared enough to make out a distinct Roman numeral. written onto the forehead of the blue man standing in front of me. I am not joking here. I yelled, tell me who you guys are and where I am. The blue man currently trapped in my arms, the one with the 2 on his forehead, let out an annoyed sigh. And you'll do what exactly? Fly back up into orbit just to get ham-fisted by the big O again? Relax, tough guy, we're the ones who scooped your brains back into your skull. I am the champion evaluation officer for the coalition of planets, I declared, puffing out my chest as best I could while holding a hostage. I am tasked with testing planetary defenders against Viltrumite threats. I demand to meet whoever is in charge here. The Mauler with the I on his forehead mocked me. Oh, and what makes you think I'm not the one in charge? Twang. A strange sound echoed through the sterile lab as a wooden door fitted with paper panels slid open, appearing quite literally out of thin air. Hey, Maulers, that is no way to treat our guest, a calm voice called out. I dropped the blue man and turned around. Standing in the doorway was a human, but something was different about him. He had piercing blue eyes that looked like a deep nebula, blonde hair like a sun flare, and wore pristine Earth clothes. He carried an air of authority that felt remarkably similar to the coalition councilman back on Taliscria. It is good to see you finally up and energetic, Mr. Allen, the man smiled warmly, pulling a clean white towel from his inventory space and tossing it directly into my hands. Oh, where are my manners? Let me introduce myself. I am John Kaisen. John Kaisen's Pav. I watched the orange alien furiously rub the neon green stasis fluid out of his single eye, my mind briefly wandering back to the chaos of the past. It had been nearly a week since that disastrous sidekick rendezvous in Midnight City. The night I found Alan the alien crashed in an industrial lot, his body burned from atmospheric re-entry and a fist-sized hole punched straight through his eye, I knew exactly what had happened. Nolan must have snapped. I quickly had Nakame portal Alan directly to the Mauler twins' lab and ordered them to stabilize the unopen immediately. I could have easily used the massive windfall of cash from Cecil, the $1 billion that arrived just a day after my little extortion stunt with the sidekicks. Nakame had even suggested I use greedy healing to fully restore him, given that she now understood how important Alan was in the grand scheme of fighting the Viltrumites. But I denied her request. I only used $10 million worth of gold to stabilize his vitals and stop the bleeding. Alan's entire gimmick was his reactive evolution. His natural adaptability was his greatest weapon, and I feared that if I instantly healed him, his body's natural adaptation process would falter, and he wouldn't get the massive power boost needed to actually survive a fight against a Viltrumite. He needed to heal the hard way to get stronger. Feat achieved. Save Alan the alien. Reward. Plus 1x gold random gacha ticket. And now a week later, here we were. In another urgent news, Pepsi Man saves the day again after cooling down a volcanic eruption by, you guessed it, Pepsi. He's quickly becoming a fan favorite in polls, leaving behind. I switched off the flat screen I had the Maulers install. Things seems to be going well for somebody at least. Alan was sitting comfortably on a plush sofa in the corner of the lab, a thick wool blanket covering his nethers, happily sipping on a mug of hot cocoa near a space heater. Wow. What is this drink? Alan asked, his single eye widening in delight as he took another loud slurp. This, hot cocoa, it's almost as good as Canslock. A little heavy on the marshmallows, but I respect the aesthetic. Alan's in, we have some questions for you, Nakame asked softly, standing dutifully by my side. When we found you, it was clear you had been brutally manhandled. We doubt it was Nolan who did this to you. She tilted her head, her single eye blinking with curiosity. Alan paused mid-sip. Humans have Cyclops. Wait, Nolan. Mauler I leaned against a nearby console, chiming in. Yeah, big guy, about 6'2", graying temples, perfect mustache, piercing blue eyes, and a body sculpted like a Greek god as if he'd been chiseled out of marble. I quickly coughed into my fist to stop the Mauler from sounding like he was writing an Omni-Man smut fanfiction. Wait, mustache, you mean Omni-Man, you're Urith's champion? Alan asked, his eye blinking in confusion. It's Earth, not Urith, you illiterate orange dipshit. Get it right, Mauler 2 muttered, serving a cup of hot cocoa for Nakame. What? But I was sent to Urith to check for Viltrumite presence and... Alan trailed off, looking perplexed as if pieces of truth finally clicked into place of misunderstanding. I fought him, we talked, he seemed like a really reasonable, buff Urithan. Mauler I burst out laughing. Buddy, Omni-Man has been on Earth for 20 years. He is the Viltrumite presence. Alan looked utterly dismayed, his hands gripping the mug tightly. But I tested him so many times. He was a Viltrumite this whole time. I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling a massive migraine building. God damn it, Alan, your whole species was nearly wiped out because of them. How can you not recognize one when you've been fighting him for years? Alan looked down at his hot cocoa, looking incredibly defensive. Hey, you try telling billions of Biclops apart. He squinted his massive single eye defensively, raising a thick orange finger and pointing back and forth between the two hulking, blue-skinned Mauler twins. You all have the exact same face. 2 eyes, 1 nose, a mouth, it gets confusing, okay. There was a deafening silence in the lab as we heard the ding of the microwave where another cup of cocoa was heating up. It was immediately broken by the Mauler twins bursting into roaring laughter. They both walked over and slapped the alien on his broad shoulders. Mr. Kaisen, where did you even get this guy from? Mauler, I wheezed, wiping a tear from his eye. He's functionally blind even with the giant eyeball. Seriously, this guy's racist humor is totally whack. I may even clone him to keep as a friend. Mauler 2 added. Alright, don't get your panties wet, I sighed, raising a hand to quiet them down. I faced the unopen. Mr. Allen, I apologize for my outburst. But you need to understand how dangerous a Viltrumite is to our planet. Especially one who'll do anything to hunt me down. Yeah, they are dangerous to all life, Alan nodded, his expression turning serious. But why is Omni, Nolan, after you specifically? Because I know a secret, I said smoothly, leaning against the sofa. A secret that, if it got out, the Viltrum Empire would send their entire armada to silence me. Wait, you can't be serious. Is there really such a secret? Alan leaned forward, his eye wide. The great Titus needs to know about this. I can share the secret with the coalition as a token of good faith, I offered. But I need something in return. Well, all my communication devices were destroyed back when Nolan fisted me, Alan said absent-mindedly. The Mauler twins immediately started snickering like schoolboys at the accidental double entendre. Then we will need to hammer out a formal deal with the coalition when you return with a communication device, I nodded. I gestured to Nakame. She walked over and handed Alan a simple, freshly tailored orange and white jumpsuit, perfectly matching the design of his previous coalition uniform. Here, I said, I had the best at the GDA make this for you. Thanks, man, Mr. Kaisen, Alan grinned, pulling the suit over his massive frame. It is a bit weird being naked in front of anyone except my girlfriend. After a few hours of recovering, the sharp twang of Nakim's biwa rang out. My crew and I stepped through the tatami gate, emerging onto a grassy hill under the clear night sky of Chicago. Alan, now fully dressed in his new suit, looked at me and cracked a joke about Earth's gravity. He then turned to Nakame, smoothly taking her hand and pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. I must say, I have never seen a more beautiful Cyclops than you, my dear, Alan flirted, giving her a charming wink. Nakame immediately pulled her hand back, extending the nails of her other hand to tear the skin off her hands, and looked greatly offended. Her single eye was utterly disgusted by the gesture. She stepped behind me, maintaining her professional distance. Alan, shocked and embarrassed, just floated up a few feet into the air, waving his hand cheerfully. I will be back as soon as I can, Mr. Kaisen. We can finally discuss your deal with the coalition. With a burst of speed, he shot straight up into the atmosphere, disappearing into the full moon. I turned around, only to find both the Mauler twins and Nakame looking oddly downcast. What? I asked, raising an eyebrow. The Maulers spoke, completing each other's sentences flawlessly. It's just that, boss. We really hit it off with that guy. Yeah, he really got our style of humor. A real shame he works for the space cops. They sighed in unison. I snorted at their antics and looked at Nakame. And you, don't tell me his terrible flirting actually worked. I teased. She quickly shook her head, her face flushing slightly. Please do not joke, master. My heart could never waver from you. But, he was someone who looked like. She pointed hesitantly at her single, large eye. I smiled softly, wanting to step forward and comfort her. Then, the crickets completely stopped chirping. A suffocating silence fell over the Chicago night in a fraction of a second. Boom! A deafening sonic boom shattered the peaceful night as a blur of orange shot down from the sky at untraceable speeds. It slammed directly into the grassy ground a few dozen yards away from us. The impact caused a massive tremor, nearly knocking the maulers off their feet as a massive dust cloud plumed into the air as a spiderweb of deep cracks formed all across the hill. When the dust settled slightly, my heart hitched. It was Alan. He was lying in the center of the crater. But there was a gaping, bloody hole that had been punched completely through the side of his stomach. Intestines and bright red blood spilt onto the torn grass. A shadow fell over the crater. A voice boomed from the sky above us. It wasn't the regal tone of Omni-Man. It was something far, far worse. It was a voice dripping with manic arrogance, age and centuries of unquestioned slaughter. "Get ready for my arrival, worm." We looked up. Floating lazily above the crater was an old man. He had a thick white mustache, a dead right eye with a scar running down it and a bulky prosthetic gauntlet replacing his right arm. He wore a pristine white and gray suit, with a three-line logo of the Viltrum Empire. I found myself standing face to face with the most unhinged and bloodthirsty Viltrumite in the entire goddamn species. A cold sweat broke out as I felt the air leave my lungs. Is that motherfucking Conquest?" I whispered in paralyzing horror. Chapter 54, The Meltdown. Third-person POV. There was an undeniable mathematics to the human psyche. Ever since John had been dragged into this reality of space fascists and cursed monsters, he had been subjected to a relentless barrage of trauma. It was one catastrophic event after another. His existence had been a restless exercise in subtraction. Imagine an 18-year-old pampered kid dying from a pathetic addiction in his previous life, only to be thrust into this grim world where false gods walk the earth. You subtract his safety, you subtract his peace of mind, and you finally surprise his sense of self by forcing him into withdrawals for his addictions. A human mind, having gone through so much physical and emotional devastation, was bound to break. Fortunately, John had his familiars. He had Nakim's unwavering devotion. He had Sebas's stoic guidance. But then, he watched Sebas sacrifice himself tragically to a beast of unimaginable power. These kinds of trauma do not just disappear. They sit there, festering down in the dark, piled up in layers, compacting under its own weight, fraying rope holding a fragile sanity together. And when a mind has no more bandwidth for stress, that rope is destined to snap. John's thread snapped after so much anguish. When Conquest smiled, there was a momentary blankness in John's mind. A deep, suffocating frustration he had been hiding since Sebas's death that finally reached its tipping point. But before his brain could even process the command to move, Conquest blitzed. It did not even look like movement. It looked like the universe deleted the space between them as the old Viltrumite's prosthetic gauntlet launched forward, aiming directly for John's chest. Before the blow could land, Nakame surprisingly appeared before John. She did not hesitate and placed her own body between her master and certain death. The impact was catastrophic. Conquest's fist punched clean through her torso with a wet, meaty tear. Flesh separated from flesh as bone shattered into fragments. The force sent the lower half of the demoness's body hurling backwards, tumbling through the air in a spray of arterial red, and smashed into Mahler II with enough force to fold the clone in half. Mahler II's ribcage caved inward with a nasty crunch. His body wrapped around Nakim's legs like a broken action figure and the two of them cratered into the dirt 20 yards away. John barely caught Nakim's upper half. The residual momentum dragged him backwards, his boots carving deep trenches into the grass from the friction. It all happened in less than a split second, and when John came to, his heart stopped completely. He dropped to his knees, with hands soaked in her blood. He called out to her. His voice increased in volume and panic with each desperate cry. "Nakame, Nakame, wake up, Nakame, wake up. Master, I am fine, I just need blood," Nakame whispered. Her single eye focused on his face, entirely unconcerned with her own horrific state. Seeing Nakim's legs already straining to regenerate, John's heart finally started to beat again. He whipped his head around to see Mahler I. The surviving clone had already ditched his crushed brother, dragged Alan's body and was running straight toward them with a frantic expression. "Mahler, quick, get Nakame the immortal flesh." John barked in a cracking voice, "Nakame, open a gate." But as he was speaking and saw Nakame struggling to lift her broken biwa, he remembered they weren't alone. He looked up and saw Conquest floating above them, eyeing the group as if looking at zoo animals, taking in all their angles with an amused grin. No, don't stop on my account," Conquest goaded, his voice dripping with manic arrogance. "Let me see your little parlor tricks. Show me the sorcery that had the great Nolan tuck his tail between his legs." Twang. As the tatami gate opened, Nakim's bare legs fully reformed. But before she could even stand up, Mahler I scooped her and Alan's body into his massive arm and bolted for the door. "Master, John, hurry and get inside the castle," she screamed, reaching her blood-slick hand out toward him. John stayed silent at first. Still on his knees, still full of so many complicated emotions. He looked at the floating conquest and then looked back at Nakame. "Go," John ordered, his voice cracking. "He is here for me. He wants entertainment. If I tried to escape with you, he'll just turn us all into mincemeat before we can take a single step in the castle." Nakame screamed in denial, "No, I'd rather die than let you be in danger. Please John, you are more important." But Mahler I, trusting his survival instincts, carried her and Alan into the Infinity Castle, strung her biwa with a thick finger, and closed the door behind them. Conquest smiled, taking masochistic pleasure in cornering his prey. "You are smart for a monkey, aren't you, little sorcerer?" Conquest chuckled, his dead right eye staring sightlessly while his left tracked John's every micro-expression. John's heart was hammering so hard it felt like it was trying to crack his sternum from the inside. Thump, 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 trauma, stress, grief, rage. All the overwhelming emotions held together by a single thread of logic finally snapped. "Gah!" John let out a feral scream and threw a desperate punch, aiming directly for Conquest's head. The Viltrumite did not even blink and swatted John away like a gnat. The backhand sent John's body dragging across the ground, carving a violent trench across the field. "Is that all?" Conquest sighed, sounding bored. "I was told there would be resistance. Was Nolan mistaken?" John, after coughing up a thick mouthful of blood, spilling onto the grass, forced himself back up. "That hurt, you bitch." John finally realized how weak he still was, even after the Zenkai boost from nearly dying to battle beast and all those radiation doses. Frustrated, he activated wind flight and flew straight at Conquest, only to be effortlessly kicked in the temple. John pinwheeled through the air and fell in the opposite direction, crashing straight through a line of thick oak trees along the way. "Maybe I was mistaken," Conquest mused aloud, floating higher to survey the damage. "That means Thula and Vidor will get to the real sorcerer first." He looked toward where John was getting up again. The boy was flying at Conquest at full speed, blood flooding from the deep cut on his temple. "You worm," Conquest's voice finally cracked as genuine anger bled through. "You disguised yourself as the sorcerer and let my actual prey be hunted by someone else." Conquest cocked back a haymaker to finally deal with this inferior nuisance. But suddenly, something changed. Electricity crackled all over John's body. He activated Impulse and suddenly accelerated, lowering his height to barely slip under the incoming fist, and tackled Conquest at the knees. Conquest, already planning to leave and hunt down the real sorcerer, had taken his prey lightly. He did not see the change in John's eyes, and before he could even flex his muscles to resist, a sharp twang rang out in the air. Conquest felt himself being pushed backwards as he found himself passing through a wooden frame of sorts, and then suddenly, he realized something was very, very wrong. Their position had changed entirely. He quickly used both hands to hammer down on John's back, forcing the boy off of him. Conquest looked around to finally realize he had been teleported. He could feel the blistering temperature in the massive, cavernous hall, he could even feel the wrongness of the air, and most importantly, he felt the same sensation he got whenever he flew too close to a star. That was the dread invoked by a fully critical, ready to explode nuclear reactor. The walls were lined with thick lead and concrete. The massive cooling pools glowed with the haunting and utterly lethal blue-green light of Cherenkov radiation. It was a cathedral of toxic energy. Ha, ha ha, ha ha ha. Conquest heard a manic laugh from down below. He saw John coming out from the very core of the reactor pool. The boy's skin was boiling red from the blistering heat, his clothes already burned off, but he was grinning like an absolute lunatic, reminding Conquest of himself. "I can't fucking believe this," John screamed, his voice psychotic and reedy. "I come to this world ready to go, all in. But I end up face to face against Nolan, the entire Flaxen Armada, then fucking Battle Beast, and now Conquest of all people. And it has been what? A month since I got dropped into this shitshow." John floated up, his eyes locking onto Conquest. It wasn't the look of cornered prey anymore. It was the look of a gambler who had just pushed all his chips to the center of the table. To Conquest, it was the look of a warrior. "Maybe I was not mistaken after all." Conquest grinned, his bloodlust flaring. As the Viltrumite tensed to dive straight down to crush him, John put two fingers to his mouth. "Phew it," Come here, boy, John called out. Conquest watched in eager anticipation, letting his prey show the same power that forced the great Nolan of all to seek help. He saw, almost in slow motion, as a black sludge covered in green circuity encased the boy whole, its frame expanding and hardening. Green energy raced across his body as matte black armor formed around him piece by piece. Heavy gauntlets locked over his arms, reinforced boots slammed into place, and glowing green lines lit up across the suit's surface like flowing circuitry. With the final snap of the helmet sealing shut, he stood transformed into a 6-foot mech suit, an advanced biomechanical armor, cloaked in black with glowing neon green circuitry. Reminding Conquest of the Geldarian battlesuits. You know, a heavily distorted voice came from the suit's green faceplate. When I first found out Nolan fled Earth, I knew that somehow, someway, he'd come running back to finish what we started. So, I had my people prepare something special. John, in his armored form, spread his mechanical arms wide. A proper battleground. Thrusters ignited around the armor's back, accelerating John straight up toward the descending Viltrumite. Welcome to America, arsehole. John roared. The nanite-covered metal fist connected with Conquest's jaw, sending the old Viltrumite flying backwards, crashing into the boiling radioactive water of the reactor core with a massive splash. Inside the suit's HUD, John heard Nakim's mental voice. Master, Neil has put everything in place. All rectors across the eastern seaboard are in a critical state, with evacuation already in progress. But are you sure you want to face this monster and not come back to the safety of the castle, to me? I can't, Nakame, John replied, his thoughts moving a mile a minute. I'm I'm shit scared. But I am also so unbelievably fucking angry at the world, throwing its worst at me again and again relentlessly while I am just trying to get by. At this point, I need to take a stand right here, right now. Master, please, now is not the time to be stubborn. Do as I say, Nakame. Get in touch with Cecil. There are at least 2 more Viltrumites out there, 3 if you count Nolan. We need to save as many citizens as we can too. Nakame cut him off. No, John, you need to think of your own safety. Why would you even think about saving those humans when you are in mortal danger? Nakame, sweetheart, don't let panic cloud your mind. John soothed her. Do you not remember my true hero trait? I need you to save as many people as you can to give me the biggest stat boost possible. After a moment of pause, a voice of conviction echoed in his mind. Your wish is my command, Master. 42 comments 0 vote. All in. John Pav. Your wish is my command, Master. Through his HUD, John saw a humanoid shape floating up from the reactor waters. Oi, you old maniac. I do not have time to dilly-dally with foreplay, John shouted. He put his mechanical arms together, and the green nanites began to rapidly transform, shifting into a massive, heavy-duty energy cannon that was nearly as large as the suit itself. Conquest roared and laughed as he flew up. I knew it, I knew I could finally. THOOM. He was cut mid-sentence as a blinding blast of concentrated energy encased him entirely. The force of the beam pushed him violently back down into the reactor and punching his body straight through the lead base into the raw radioactive material. Conquest, after taking a moment to recover, finally looked up as he began to fly at John again. Was that just to warm me up, THOOM. He was cut short by another blast, halting his momentum. He got up again, only this time he felt something warm leak from his nose. He wiped it with his thumb, looking at the red smear with absolute glee. All this for a drop of blood. Another blast slammed into him. THOOM. Hey, let me. THOOM. Complete. THOOM. My fucking sentence. He was cut short again and again, each consecutive blast more powerful than the last. Finally, the semblance of control vanished from his demeanor. Conquest let out a guttural roar. RRRAAAHHH. He flew straight up, facing another powerful blast from John's cannon head-on. Only this time, he simply flew through the beam despite the small cuts and burns searing his flesh, the momentum of his flight overpowering the weapon. Conquest reached out, grabbing the long barrel of the cannon and with a sickening crunch of metal, he crushed it under his arm, causing the cannon to violently detonate. The catastrophic explosion sent both John and Conquest flying in opposite directions. Hey, buddy, how long till we get the right song? John asked inside his HUD, wincing at the impact. Ship spoke in a strained electronic whine. Ship, a battery icon on John's visor blinked a flashing red. What, already? Were you mechamorphs not supposed to be all-powerful? John complained. The armor shifted to compensate, growing heavy missile pods from the shoulders. John sent a barrage to intercept the flying conquest, using the explosions to dodge the Viltrumity's relentless pursuit. "Stand still and die, you annoying little insect," Conquest bellowed, his voice carrying over the explosions. John ignored the taunt. "Quick, take my blood as fuel for your function." The mechamorph worriedly squealed in refusal. "Ship, ship, ship. Just do it, ship. That's an order." John focused his mind entirely on his eternal bleed and blood fuel traits. As he was busy solving his pet's food problem, Conquest appeared right behind him. The moonlight managed to pierce through the cracked ceiling of the reactor, painting the horrific scene like a classical Renaissance painting. Image here. Conquest locked his hands together and smacked John squarely in the spine, driving him back inside the reactor core. The suit's nanites screeched in pain as the sound of "Sheep" filled the echoing room. "Crying for mercy already, kid," Conquest bellowed, licking the blood off of his own knuckles. "Let's be honest, it was mostly your Cyclops girlfriend that did the heavy lifting against Nolan. I can't wait to rip her apart. Again, maybe slower this time, really savor it." But suddenly, the entire reactor glowed a sickly green. Flash, the intense light almost blinding the old Viltrumit, who had to block his vision from the light. When the light dimmed, John's suit had shifted. The destroyed cannon had transformed into heavy-set gauntlets. John pivoted midair, catching the Viltrumit completely off guard and sending him knocking back down into the water with a brutal right hook. And so, the agonizing fight continued as the late night finally gave way to early sun. Conquest and John were locked in a trance of smashing each other all over the county. Conquest was genuinely beginning to enjoy the thrill of the hunt. But the old warrior did question one thing. How the hell did the boy have so much power when he was nearly dying just a few hours ago? What had happened was ingenuity. Whenever Conquest threw John back into the reactor, John formed an endless loop of energy. This entire plan was set up in just a week with Cecil's aid, anticipating Nolan's return. John's glowing one trait allowed him to absorb ambient radiation. He was sucking up all the deadly radiation in America's largest active nuclear plant, using it to hypercharge his body. He used that raw power to scale up his stats and fuel his eternal bleed trait, which in turn was consumed by Ship via the blood fuel trait to keep the mechamorph armor operating at maximum capacity. It was a perpetual motion machine built on pain and reckless desperation. With careful planning, some acceptable body mutilation, and Nakim's portals shifting them from one nuclear site to another across the country whenever one ran dry, John was able to match Conquest and force a bloody stalemate. He was intentionally sucking up enough power to kickstart the Stone Age just to stay alive. But John knew the reactors were nearly finished. The last site would soon dry up, and the ambient radiation would soon be drained to completely safe levels. John planned to use his remaining cards and simultaneously slotted in Call to Arms and Fate Draw. The roll for the temporary summon stopped. Ship took over the suit's controls to keep Conquest busy while John looked at the result. Round Deer, Elite Familiar, Jujutsu Kaisen, a towering deer Shikigami that constantly emits a healing aura of positive energy. The round deer can focus its aura to heal a specific target faster. This aura can even recover limbs, but the stronger a target is, the slower the energy will affect them. Scales with user energy. John, reading the description, smiled. He brought both his hands together, crossing his fingers to form the hand sign, casting a reindeer shadow on the walls. A giant, majestic deer with 4 golden eyes, thick white fur and bulbous ends on its sharp antlers materialized from John's shadow in the ruined reactor hall. As the round deer's rut, and began, using the reversed cursed technique to rapidly heal John as a tarot card suddenly appeared in his hand from the fate draw. IV the Emperor, elite item. Tarot card creates immense mental pressure that can dominate a target or crush their minds. 72-hour cooldown. Why is it that whenever I need gambling to work for me, it always gives me garbage? John thought bitterly. Well, it's not all bad. He felt his body, which was on the verge of collapse, littered with bruises and ruptured organs, finally beginning to knit back together. He had actually been saving greedy healing since that was a finite resource based on his physical assets. John brought out the rest of his arsenal. He consumed scrap iron candy and buff out, quickly ingesting the chems while activating 14, Temperance card. A green glow lit up in his iris as the cold, calculating numbness of pure logic completely took over his panicking and restless brain. He felt his stats, boosted by radiation and the true hero trait, increase in a drastic margin, increasing the physical defense of his body. Alright, John breathed, finally in a steady voice. How about a round 2, you geriatric fuck? But before John could take manual control back from ship, a mental voice interrupted him. Master, Nakame whispered, her telepathic voice heavy with sorrow. I have been rescuing citizens nationwide as you ordered. But some of them are far too injured to be salvaged, and a few hundred were already dead before I could even reach them. Please forgive me. John clicked his tongue. He remembered all the innocent civilians that died whenever Nolan, Conquest, Invincible variants or any other Viltrumite decided to view humans as mere ants. Fuck, I need to think clearly, John thought, the temperance card making it easy for him to detach from the grief and focus entirely on the logic of the battlefield. Polymerization. John breathed in a cold voice. But instead of focusing the spell on himself, the glowing orange symbol flew up and branded itself onto Round Deer. Simultaneously, a purple symbol glowed in another dimension entirely, marking Nakim's forehead. He fused Nakame and Round Deer as the massive beast vanished from the reactor hall, its healing cut off abruptly. Master, why? Nakame asked, confused by the sudden surge of energy. The stat boost from the true hero trait is worth more than regeneration. I saved my assets just for situations like this, John replied coldly. The radiation plants we marked are all dried up. I need raw power just to keep this crazy bastard in a stalemate. Inside the Infinity Castle, Nakame looked down at her body. A thick, ethereal white fur coat now draped over her black kimono, the same majestic antlers as the Round Deer grew from her head. And most surprisingly, another eye blossomed on her face, granting her perfect binocular vision that she forgot what it was like. She embraced this new purifying power, completely opposite to the darkness running rampant inside her. I will make sure to save every human in need, Master. I will turn you into the greatest hero this world has ever seen. That is my word. John meanwhile, took control of the suit back from ship. He realized the grand plan to draw out the fight through attrition was no longer going to be successful. The plan was made with Nolan in mind, but Conquest was another being altogether. And so, he did the only sensible thing and gambled. John opened his system interface and saw he had 2 platinum and 1 gold. Well, 2 gold if I counted the ticket I'd saved aside for Sebas, he wouldn't mind, right? What's the point holding onto it if I die anyways? And so, he tore them all while his suit kept Conquest busy. The first platinum roll came to a stop. Ace of all trades. Legendary skill. You have expert level expertise in all basic trade skills, expert blacksmithing, medicine, mechanics, cooking, interfacing, granting you expertise comparable to the real masters of the trades. And if you choose to train them further, you are also far more talented in any trade field. John felt an incredible headache, made worse by Conquest kicking him squarely in the chest. He was sent flying for miles. The only thing that John felt was his previous skill, Jack of all trades, elevating as more and more information and phantom experience got added to his already hefty base knowledge, inscribing everything on his neural pathways. Fuck, my first legendary pull and the only thing I could possibly use was the nimble finger it gave me from the expert interfacing. As he was about to see the result of his second platinum, Conquest came rushing in, grabbed him by the back of his head, and dragged him face-first to the ground. Using his newfound knowledge of interfacing, John got out of the deadlock and kicked the back against Conquest, but the old man flipped in air and made way straight to him. John could hardly spare the new ability a glance before Conquest made himself the center of attention. No fucking wah-ack, boom, Conquest made full use of his inactivity, delivering a devastating double-fisted blow to John's stomach like a bat to a ball, sending him crashing through the reinforced walls of the reactor. As he flew towards the open plains, metal tumbling around his flight path, the gold roll came to a halt. Rule of Cool. Uncommon trait. You have the Rule of Cool. Physics bends around you slightly to allow you to do things the cool way while ignoring the fact that it shouldn't work. Style and substance, baby. Grab a bullet out of the air and send it back. Walk with your back to an explosion without feeling anything. Do tricks in the middle of a fight without incurring any disadvantages, etc. Doing things the cool way just comes naturally to you. Does not affect your stats or level of skills. John felt something settle in his body, or rather his soul, as he felt the universe itself wrapping around him, being goaded into making him cooler. Useless. As he flew away from Conquest, he saw another gold and his last ticket finally came to a stop. Mind Blast. Uncommon ability. Allows you to send a wave of shimmering psionic energy through your eyes. When hitting a sentient target, it will cause mental damage to them, confusing them and giving them painful headaches. The effectiveness depends on the mental and magical power of the target. He felt the power settle in my mind as everything within his mental state, whether it be clarity or sharpness or something unknown, all got elevated. Not great but not bad either. John muttered in relief as he flew towards an incoming conquest. Ship no longer had to hold his own against the millennium-old fighter. The two met in clash that shook the reactor and the surrounding Earth for miles. Punches flew out, enormous yellow flashes lit the building, mingled in with their battle cries. John tried using mental blast to mess with Conquest's mind. At best, it allowed him to dodge his punches easier. It wasn't enough. He had to go for the final option and end this. I can't say this was fun, old man, John said, staring down the blood-soaked Viltrumite floating across from him. Maybe in another life we could have been, no, you know what? I wouldn't want to know someone like you in any life. But this ends right now. John finally slotted in his most risky yet rewarding ability. Limit Break, epic ability, time to go all out. Upon activating Limit Break, for 4 minutes and 11 seconds all parameters and energy regeneration are massively increased. In addition, your ability slots are removed, allowing you to use all abilities at once. This places immense strain on your body and can kill you. 7-day cooldown. The air around John warped, shattering the concrete beneath his boots as unrestrained power flooded outward in visible waves, distorting the reactor hall's atmosphere. It's time to go all fucking in. 38 comments 0 vote. A pet, Nolan's POV. Space was the only place left where I could still think clearly. I floated in the cold vacuum above Earth's atmosphere, clad once again in my pristine white and gray Viltrumite uniform. Below me, the blue and green marble spun lazily in the dark. It had only been a short few weeks in Earth's time since I had fled to a Viltrumite outpost, after hurting Debbie. But true peace was a luxury the Viltrum Empire did not afford its soldiers. What's the hang-up? Is the sorcerer still down there? Thula's telepathic voice cut into my thoughts. I turned slowly with a clenched jaw. Floating a few yards away were 3 of the Empire's most lethal executioners. Thula, holding her razor-sharp braid. Vidor still bored, taking Earth's defense lightly. And Conquest, the scarred, the madman who lived only for the slaughter. General Craig had sent them with me, to round up this anomalous sorcerer, and finally prepare the planet for its inevitable takeover. I closed my eyes as the name Kaisen echoed in my skull, immediately bringing forth a bulbous rage. The curse that had infected my mind flared to life, pulling at my very blood with the urge to dive down there and rip the boy apart was a very physical agony in my chest. Yes, John Kaisen is still down there, I replied telepathically, keeping my face an impassive mask. But I must warn you. I stopped that thought as all 4 of us shifted our gaze downward. Shooting up from the stratosphere at breakneck speed was a familiar flash of orange. As the figure broke the exosphere, we finally saw him fully. Alan of Unopen, the Coalition of Planets Evaluation Officer. He's not only still alive after I carved his head out, but also fully healed in such short time. Someone must have interfered. Alan's single eye widened in surprised terror as he registered not one, but a squad of 4 elite Viltrumites floating in orbit. He immediately tried to arrest his momentum, scrambling to turn back and flee into the safety of the planet down below. He didn't make it. The Unopen is mine, Conquest roared psychically. The old man moved with a speed that still surprised me, even after centuries of fighting alongside him. He grabbed Alan by the top of his head to hold him in place, cocking back his prosthetic gauntlet, and with a wet crunch, drove it clean through the alien's torso. Instead of an immediate kill, Conquest leaned in close. His single good eye stared straight through Alan as he forced his thoughts violently into Alan's mind, a psychotic hiss meant only for the dying alien. Conquest ripped his arm out, letting the bleeding, broken Unopen fall limply back down toward Earth's gravitational pull like a discarded piece of trash. Conquest turned to the rest of the squad, licking the red blood from his metal knuckles. The sorcerer is also mine to hunt. Thula scoffed, her braid uncoiling slightly. You already claimed the Unopen, Conquest. Don't be greedy. Vidor didn't even bother opening his eyes. Let the old man have his fun. The rest of the insects are ours to handle. Since there is no need to maintain the facade for the coalition. Might as well enjoy ourselves. Thula spoke offhandedly. I just closed my eyes, dismissing their nonchalance. Remember, I projected, my mental voice carrying the uncompromising weight of an elite vanguard. No one touches my son nor my mate. I will deal with them myself. Conquest merely rolled his one good eye, having no interest in the sentimentals or the logistics of planetary integration. He turned and dove straight down toward the planet's surface, eager to hunt. Thula and Vidor exchanged a nod before streaking down into the atmosphere, leaving a trail of fire in their wake. I looked back at the blue marble. It is finally time to face them, huh? I whispered into the void. The house was suffocatingly quiet. I stood in the center of my living room, still wearing my Viltrumite uniform. I had called out for Mark and Debbie upon entering, only to be met with the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the hallway clock. They must have been out running errands. I paced the length of the carpet, my hands rubbing the back of my neck, rehearsing the words like they were going to be my last. I killed the guardians of the globe, I muttered to the empty room. Wait, before you say anything, just listen. I stopped, pinching the bridge of my nose. Please, I'm not a monster. I didn't want to do it, but it had to be done. It was my responsibility. I stopped as I looked at the framed family photo on the mantel. It was a simple picture of Mark, smiling brightly, with Debbie's arms wrapped around us both. Yet it was more precious than the many worlds I'd conquered for the Empire. Other people won't understand that, but I know you can. What I'm about to tell you will change everything. My voice thickened as I spoke to the picture of my son, betraying the stoic Viltrumite discipline I was desperately trying to maintain. Just remember, you're my son, and I love you and your mother more than. I let out a heavy, shuddering sigh. What am I doing? Beep, beep. Suddenly, the sleek device on my wrist beeped with a harsh, demanding tone. My posture instantly straightened as the vulnerable father vanished, replaced by the hardened soldier of the Empire. I threw away the picture and tapped the console to answer. A holographic display flickered to life, projecting the stern visage of General Craig. Nolan, Craig greeted, his voice cold and analytical as always. Has the boy agreed to come under the Viltrumite Empire? General, I need more time. This is a delicate matter. Delicate matter, Craig interrupted, his single eye narrowing. For what? Showing a coddled halfling his proper place in the grand plan. Don't forget, it was you, the great Nolan, who came groveling mid-mission, begging for aid to be rid of this so-called curse. And I have told you, General. The curse is a real threat, as were the other possible threats I eliminated for the sake of the Empire. I said in a raised voice to defend my stance. Did you think I would be callous enough to place this on the same level of danger as Ragnar's and space racers without reason? I believe your caution, Nolan, Craig replied evenly. But claiming this curse of Earthlings brings impossibilities like a dragon capable of matching your strength, or an infinitely cloning human, still requires living proof. And that's why a squad of our most elite was sent. To break this Kaisen you speak of, and bring him to Viltrum to be studied. Or killed, if he proves too troublesome. Yes, General, I appreciate, Craig snapped, his lip curling in disgust. Mind your tongue, Nolan. Or has breeding with the same hairless monkey sullied it? General, you, what? Craig challenged, stepping closer to the holographic projector. Don't tell me you have fallen into another curse of compassion for your human mate. No, I lied, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I fell back on my deepest conditioning, saying the words I knew would satisfy the general. She is just an asset. But still, a special specimen that was successful in breeding. Clang. I whipped my head around only to find Mark and Debbie standing in the entryway to the kitchen. A fresh, thick cast was wrapped tightly around Debbie's forearm, and her good hand hovered near her mouth. The canvas grocery she had been carrying was spilt across the hardwood floor, apples and canned goods rolling silently across the room. Their mouths hung open, and their eyes were wide with horror and disbelief. Debbie, Mark, I stammered, the hologram flickering on my wrist. How long have you? Nolan, what are you waiting for? Get them. I crushed the wrist device in my palm, violently cutting off Craig's transmission. The metal crumpled like wet paper, cutting into my own skin. I took a step forward, my eyes filled with naked panic. It's not what it looks like. There. I looked at Debbie's broken arm in the cast. It was a physical proof of my destructive nature from when I had unintentionally hurt her a week ago. My arms fell limply to my sides as I looked down at the floor, unable to meet her eyes. Nolan, Debbie whispered, her voice trembling so violently it barely carried across the room. You're back. What was that? Who were you talking to? I swallowed hard. It was my general. He has ordered me to get you to Viltrum to be studied and marks for indoctrination. Mark moved in a blur. He crossed the hall in a fraction of a second, grabbing me by the collar of my uniform and slamming me against the dry wall. "Dad," Mark yelled, his face inches from mine. "Someone's controlling you. Someone. It must be John. Dad, tell me how to stop him." Looking down at my son's desperate, pleading eyes, the only word that came out was his name. "Mark. John. Let my dad go. Let him go." Mark begged, tears welling in his eyes. "Stop. It's me, Mark. It's just me." I reached up, gently wrapping my hands over Mark's trembling wrists, slowly pulling them away from my collar. "This isn't how I wanted to do this," I said softly, my voice echoing with centuries of weary resignation. "But I don't have a choice. John Kaisen's interruption just fast-forwarded the plan, that's all. It's time for you to know where I really come from." I stepped away from Mark, walking past him as he remained staring at the dry wall. The truth was finally spilling out like pus from a lanced wound. "I am from Viltrum, but it's not the planet I've told you about. We created a perfect civilization, yes, but it took all of our strength, determination, and courage to get there. In order for our people to reach their full potential, we had to remove the weak from our society." Debbie let out a choked gasp, covering her mouth with her good hand. "When it was over, our population was cut in half," I continued, my voice adopting the practiced cadence of a soldier. "But what emerged from the ashes was unstoppable. By the time I was born, Viltrum was already the greatest empire in our galaxy. We decided to make it the only empire in our galaxy. Once I was old enough, I joined the war effort. It was hard, but I believed in our cause. Some species resisted, of course, but no one could withstand us for long. Soon, our empire encompassed thousands of planets. But as our territory grew, our forces were stretched thin, and our expansion stopped." I walked toward the large window overlooking our quiet, suburban street. "We needed a better, more efficient way to conquer worlds. Our most trusted officers were each given a planet to weaken by themselves. I was one of those lucky few." I turned back to look at Debbie, only for my eyes to suddenly redden, the moisture betraying me. I looked at the cast on her arm, still unable to hold her gaze. "I couldn't tell your mother why I was here. But that time's come to an end. And now, we need to get Earth ready to join the Viltrum Empire. Mark, this is good news. We can finally do what we were meant to do. Be who we were meant to be." "You lying," Mark said, but his voice cracked on the words. "You couldn't know the truth, not until you had your powers. Not until I was sure." "Sure of what?" he yelled back. "Sure you were a Viltrumite. So if I wasn't, I'd just be one more human to conquer?" Mark asked, stepping backward. "No, this doesn't make any sense. You love me, you love Mom." Mark looked over at Debbie. She had slumped against the wall, her good hand covering her mouth as she wept silently. "I know you do," Mark insisted. "Do you have any idea how long we live?" I pleaded, taking a step toward my son. "The older we get, the slower we age. Viltrumite DNA is so pure you're nearly full-blooded. You'll live for thousands of years. Do you understand what that means? Everyone you know and love will be gone before you even look 30. It's not something I want for you." I gestured to the world outside the window. "This isn't your world, it's theirs. But we can help them. We can stop wars, eliminate hunger, give them medical technology centuries ahead of what they have now. We've already been doing it. If it wasn't for you and me, this planet would be in flames. All we have to do is welcome Earth into our empire." "And Mom, you never loved her?" he asked, pointing towards a silently sobbing Debbie. I took a deep breath, the words heavy on my tongue. "I do love your mother, but she's more like a pet to me." The moment I said it, I was horrified at the words that left my mouth. I quickly whipped my head to check on Debbie, only to see her finally break. Uzuzuhu. She made a sound I'd never heard from her before. A broken, keening noise that came from somewhere deep in her chest. Her knees gave out completely, and she collapsed onto the floor in a heap, curling into herself. Her entire body shook with sobs that seemed to tear out of her. "A pet," Mark whispered. 22 comments 0 vote. "Curse you, Kaisen." "A pet," Mark whispered. The sorrow in Mark's eyes instantly vanished, replaced by a blinding fury. Mark lunged and tackled me, carrying us past the open front door. He flew up, far away from where Debbie could be hurt. "This is the only way, Mark. Calm down," I yelled over the rushing wind as we grappled in midair. "I will not calm down," Mark screamed, swinging a wild punch that I easily caught. "This is insane. What do you think is gonna happen? Did you seriously think that I'm going to go enslave my friends for a bunch of aliens I've never met? This is my life. These are my people. I tried to reason with him. We have a responsibility to Viltrum. I don't give a shit about Viltrum. Mark roared, headbutting me with all his might. And I don't care if I live a fucking million years. This is my home and I won't let you destroy it. You don't know what you're saying, I said, forcing my voice to harden into steel. And I can't let you interfere. I know exactly what I'm saying. So be it, I said in resignation. The sky over Chicago erupted. What followed was a one-sided, brutal beatdown as I systematically dismantled my own sun. We crashed through skyscrapers, shattered highways, and carved canyons through the heart of the city. Mark fought back. He swung wild haymakers, tried to grapple, and attempted to use his flight to gain advantage. But I'd been fighting for 1,000 years. Every move he made, I'd seen 100 times before. I countered his attacks and exploited every opening. With every punch I threw, the physical sensation of it chipped at my own heart. I drove my fist into Mark's stomach, sending him crashing through a commuter train car, his body tearing through metal like paper, passengers screaming and diving for cover. Flash, I saw Mark at 7 years old, swinging a plastic bat, hitting his first ever home run as I cheered from the bleachers. I grabbed Mark by the leg, yanking him out of the wreckage and slamming him face-first into the asphalt, cratering the street, water mains bursting beneath us. Flash, I saw a 10-year-old Mark on the beach, his small hands carefully packing wet sand to build a castle, proudly showing it off to me. I brought my elbow down on Mark's spine, hearing the bone crack. Flash, I saw Mark at 14, wrapping himself in silver duct tape, striking a heroic pose in the living room, proudly declaring Duct Tape Man was going to be Omniman's sidekick. The city was a war zone. Fires burned in a dozen locations. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance. And my son lay broken in the center of a ruined intersection, blood pooling beneath him. I stood over him, breathing hard. My uniform was torn. Blood, Mark's blood, covered my hands. Tears mingled with the dust on my face as I raised my fist, preparing to deliver the final blow to my own blood. Crack, a heavy mace came flying out of nowhere, striking me perfectly in the temple. The sheer kinetic force sent me flying sideways, tumbling through the rubble of a collapsed storefront. The attack, even though painful, was oddly nostalgic. Thank Zeus we made it in time. A voice rang out. I slowly moved my head, clearing the ringing from my ears and saw, standing protectively in front of Mark's broken body, was a ghost from my past. It was War Woman, the very same warrior whose neck I had snapped in the Guardians' headquarters a month ago. My mind struggled to process the impossibility of her presence when more ghosts materialized from the dust. Darkwing dropped from the shadows of a ruined overpass, Green Ghost materialized through the ground, and Martian Man uncoiled from the gaps in the rubble. Finally, Red Rush appeared in a blur of crimson, skidding to a halt beside them. Sorry, I was busy evacuating everyone into those portals. Portals. Someone opened portals to evacuate civilians. Someone healed the Guardians. Someone healed Alan. Kaisen. The rage that flared in my chest was immediate and consuming. That boy, that cursed, meddling boy had his hands in everything. He'd turned my mission into chaos. He'd exposed me, and now he'd brought back the very people I'd killed to get Earth ready for the great plan. The resurrected heroes turned in unison to face me. Omnima. Nolan. War Woman demanded, her grip tightening on her mace. I only ask you this. We were your friends. We have fought life and death side by side. So why betray us? I don't waste my breath on dead Guardians. I roared. I blitzed forward, desperate to get to Mark and leave with him. But Green Ghost, seeing my intention, phased her arms through Mark's chest, pulling the boy's body with her as she sank into the concrete, effectively hiding him under the rubble. War Woman stepped forward, swinging her mace with all her might. We are no longer guarding the innocents. We seek revenge for our fallen allies. We are now Avengers. The Guardia, Avengers coordinated flawlessly. War Woman swung her mace in wide arcs, forcing me to dodge into Martian Man's extending limbs. The Martian wrapped around my arms, pinning them just long enough for War Woman to crack her mace against my ribs. I tore free, but Red Rush was already there, delivering 100 punches to my kidneys in the span of a second before zipping away. Darkwing's explosive projectiles detonated in my face, blinding me, and when my vision cleared, War Woman's mace was already swinging toward my skull. But I was a desperate man with nothing left to lose. Fighting through the agonizing emotional weight of my actions, I tore through their defenses. I was injured, exhausted, and bleeding, but my raw power was absolute. I shattered Martian Man's grip, swatted Red Rush aside, and drove War Woman to her knees. The Avengers were battered, failing and on the back foot. Twang! A sharp, resonant sound echoed through the battlefield. My body flinched violently. It was the same accursed sound of the gremlin that had trapped me in that maze for days. My muscles locked in momentary panic outside of my control. "Where's Omaniman?" a voice roared. From the newly opened tatami gate, a mortal shot out like a missile. He saw me and charged, driven by the absolute fury of dying by a traitor's hand. His first and only move was to push his thumbs directly inside my eyes, intending to gouge them out and blind me in his rage. But my combat reflexes overrode the panic. With a swift chop of my hand, I sliced through a mortal's torso, bisecting the hero in a shower of blood. Again. Seeing their newly resurrected leader fall again angered the Avengers and broke something in them. They stopped coordinating, stopped being tactical and just attacked with everything they had left. The battle raged through the night, a relentless war of destruction and desperate survival. Hours bled together as the heroes fell one by one. War Woman collapsed from blood loss. Red Rush's leg snapped when I caught him midish. Darkwing ran out of gadgets and I finally broke him. Martian Man's body finally gave out from exhaustion and core damage, just as I'd done with Green Ghost. By the time the sky began to lighten, I stood alone in a crater that stretched for miles. Fires burned on every horizon. The entire city center was gone, just rubble and ruin remained. The Avengers lay scattered across the battered concrete, broken and unconscious, but still breathing. I slowly made my way toward the center of the crater using my one good arm to hold a horrific gash on my stomach closed, desperately holding my own guts in place. "Mark," I rasped. I looked down at the broken body of my son. Mark's teeth were shattered, his face an unrecognizable mask of swelling and clotted blood. The boy barely breathed with agonizing labor. "Why did you make me do this?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You're fighting so you can watch everyone around you die." I went on my knees to get as close to my injured son, holding back every fatherly instinct. "Think, Mark." I grabbed him by the collar, pulled him close, forgetting my wounds for a moment as the words came out in a roar that tore at my throat. "You'll outlast every fragile, insignificant being on this planet. You'll live to see this world crumble to dust and blow away. Everyone and everything you know will be gone." I shook him, desperate for him to understand. "What will you have after 500 years? Mark shifted slightly. He looked up at me through blood-filled, swollen eyes. "You, Dad," Mark whispered, gushing blood over his lips as tears streamed down his face, but his eyes were still looking at me like I was his hero. "I'd still have you." I froze. My fist, raised to deliver the final blow to finish what I'd started, to complete my mission and drag my son back to Viltrum for indoctrination, froze in the air. I looked at the broken body of the boy, at the way he was still looking at me with love and hope despite everything I'd done. I looked at the battered, breathing bodies of Avengers, the ghosts of my horrific betrayal that I couldn't bring myself to finish off. I looked at the burning city I had sworn Debbie to protect. And something inside me, something that thousands of years of Viltrumite conditioning had tried to bury, broke free. I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to finish off my son. I couldn't bring myself to kill the heroes I had bled with. I lowered my fist, my expression twisting into unbearable agony. ARGGGH. I lay down in the rubble next to my son, tears finally spilling freely over my cheeks. I quietly sobbed, a broken sound, desperately trying to suppress the overwhelming sorrow of destroying my loving family in a single day. And even in that moment, even drowning in grief, a part of my mind, the part that had been conditioned for 1,000 years, latched onto a name. A target for my rage. "Curse you." I wept into the dust, my voice a broken rasp. Kaisen. 104 comments 0 vote. Secret Guardians. Brits POV. Be strong, be brave, and let us know if you die so we can send someone else. I announced, because if there's one thing 40 years of Black Ops teaches you, it's that sugarcoating gets people killed. I chomped down on my cigar, turning to face the circus freak show Cecil had cobbled together. They called themselves the Secret Guardians. I called them a liability waiting to get their asses iced. Business baby, literally a toddler in a custom Brooks Brothers suit. Big mildew, a green blob of sentient fungus that smelled exactly as bad as you'd expect. Bulletproof, a cocky kid in an orange suit who thought he was hot shit. Best Tiger, a martial artist who fought with a blindfold fetish and an ego to match. Knockout, a woman who could hit hard enough to level buildings. Kid Thor, a guy with a magic hammer who kept insisting he was the real deal. And Wolfman, who was exactly what his name suggested. Image here, seriously, I muttered, shaking my head with a tired groan only a century of putting up with government bullshit could produce. Who even comes up with these names? Before anyone could complain, a blinding blue light engulfed the teleportation pad. The sterile walls of the Pentagon vanished, instantly replaced by the lush, towering trees of the Cook County Forest Preserves. A massive, silver full moon hung heavy in the night sky, casting an eerie, luminous glow over the clearing. And floating right in the middle of a clearing was the alien invader Nolan had brought with him. She had graying hair pulled back into a massive, heavy braid. But the end of that braid wasn't tied off with a scrunchie. It was capped with a wicked, serrated blade so sharp you could practically feel your throat itch just by looking at it. Good thing I'm invincible, I thought. She floated high in the sky, looking down at us like we were gum stuck to the bottom of her pristine alien boots. I was waiting for Earth's mightiest warriors, the ones Nolan warned us about, she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. You don't look nearly interesting enough. She finally tilted her head down, giving me a full view of her face. A few distinguished wrinkles, piercing eyes, and an expression of annoyed bitchiness. She was built like a brick shithouse and looked like she could snap my neck with her thighs. Sweet Mother of Christ, I was instantly smitten. God, I whispered, clasping my hands together as the cigar nearly slipped from my lips. The rest of my team tensed up, ready for a bloodbath, but I just closed my eyes, my voice pure with devotion. I know I've been a cynical son of a bitch, and there have been tough times where my faith wavered in the trenches. But I never lost sight of your path, and you finally delivered. You sent me this bloodthirsty angel. Yo, old man, get your damn head together, Bulletproof yelled, marching forward like the arrogant prick he always was, pointing an accusatory finger at me. He didn't get to finish the sentence. The alien didn't spare a moment's notice and whipped her head. The bladed braid snapped forward like a metallic viper, faster than the speed of sound. Snicked. My fucking hand. Ah, shit, Bulletproof shrieked, collapsing to his knees as his severed hand hit the dirt. He desperately grabbed his bloody stump, screaming and trying to stop the arterial spray. The angel whipped her blade back around, aiming a fatal sweep right at my neck, and I stepped right into the blade's path. The impact hit with the force of a tank. Son of a bitch, I grunted as I was blown sideways for 50 yards, tumbling through the dirt and carving a jagged trench through the pristine forest floor. I popped back up, dusting off my leather jacket. I looked over at her, but she was staring at her blade. It hadn't drawn a single drop of blood, and the edge looked slightly warped where it had hit me. Interesting, she murmured, her eyes locking onto me. As I jogged back to the battle, I saw Business Baby go sailing through the air in a perfect arc while Big Mildew ran faster than his blob-like frame should have allowed him to. You good, I called out as Business Baby landed in Mildew's green arms and gave me a thumbs up. Then what are you waiting for, your sitter? I barked, giddy up and get Cecil to port the damn thing. The clearing erupted into a chaotic battle of a dozen things happening concurrently. Wolfman was out of his mind, bathed in the light of the full moon, his muscles bulged unnaturally, his lunar healing factor pushed to its absolute peak. He threw himself at the Viltrumite with zero regard for defense, garnering cuts that would have killed anyone else, relying entirely on his insane lunar healing factor while letting out feral roars. Meanwhile, Knockout and Kid Thor were aggressively attacking her from the flanks. Babe, I'm gonna pound her from behind. You get on top and ride her down, Kid Thor yelled, gripping the shaft of his mystical hammer with a little too much enthusiasm as he swung. Don't tell me how to ride, sweetie, Knockout yelled back, stepping in close. Just focus and try not to finish early this time. She followed it up with a superhuman haymaker that sent the alien tumbling backward. I always knew those swingers were into weird stuff, I thought, watching them tag team the murderous space lady. Over to the side, Best Tiger was casually walking through the battlefield. The arrogant bastard was still wearing his blindfold. He wasn't even aiming at her. Casually, he raised his Desert Eagle and began firing into the air. His bullets ricocheted off trees and rocks, perfectly intercepting the alien's bladed braid midswing and knocking it away from the team. I used the still-sobbing Bulletproof as a launch pad, triggered the microthrusters in my jet boots, jumping off his back while he floated about, trying to close off the wound, making an embarrassing fuss about it. "Hey, dumbass," I yelled at Best Tiger mid-leap. "Maybe remove the blindfold. Take off the blindfold, for this." Best Tiger smirked, blindly firing a shot over his shoulder that deflected a lethal strike aimed right at his spine. Nah, it wouldn't be fair to the poor woman. Show off. I reached the apex of my jump, putting me right at eye level with the floating Viltrumite. "Hey, lady, welcome to fucking America," I yelled. I ripped my jacket open. Strapped directly to my chest was a thermal bomb, supercharged by the boys back at the labs. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second. Boom. A blinding flash of localized thermonuclear heat engulfed us both. Down below, Wolfman and Kid Thor tackled the rest of the team out of the blast radius. When the smoke cleared, my clothes were entirely vaporized. I was buck naked, suspended in midair, being held in a vice-like one-handed chokehold by the bad alien. I fired up my jet gloves, the thrusters screaming as I tried to pry her fingers off my throat, but it was like trying to bend solid titanium. "Of all humans, you are the most interesting one I've met," she said, her voice low and dangerous. She dragged the serrated edge of her blade directly across my throat. Sparks flew like a grinder on steel, but my skin didn't even turn pink. A seemingly invulnerable one. "See," I wheezed, throwing her a wink. "You can't hurt me, so why not call it even and me and you can go grab a stiff drink, lady." "A delirious maggot," she scoffed. "Well, tell me, little monkey. What will you do when I throw you in a Viltrumite prison? Will your invulnerability come to your aid when you spend the rest of your years in the dark, tied up?" "Hold your damn horses, you're moving too fast," I gasped. "Let's set up a safe word first. Look up." I pointed a naked finger at the sky. The air instantly charged with ozone. You could taste the static electricity on your tongue. In a flash of blinding blue teleporter light, the sky ripped open. A shadow the size of an office building fell over us. A massive kaiju with multiple tentacles writhing where its face should have been in chitin plating, easily 30 stories tall, crashed down directly on top of us, driving the Viltrumite and me into the dirt and sending a shockwave that flattened trees for miles in every direction. A moment later, the kaiju shrieked as the alien lady bench-pressed the massive beast off of her, tilting it until it fell on its side. She floated back up, angrily wiping a trickle of blood from her nose. I rolled out from under the beast, casually rotating my shoulder cuffs. "Still naked, by the way. Say hello to Hail Mary," I shouted, pointing at the roaring monster. The only kaiju to ever challenge Omni-Man and live to tell about it. Only this time, she's fed to the brim with buff-out and trained exclusively to hunt your kind. Hail Mary roared, launching herself at the Viltrumite. 3-3 comments 0 vote. Make love not war. Say hello to Hail Mary, I shouted, pointing at the roaring monster. The only kaiju to ever challenge Omni-Man and live to tell about it. Only this time, she's fed to the brim with buff-out and trained exclusively to hunt your kind. Hail Mary roared, launching herself at the Viltrumite. While the alien struggled to keep the rampaging, chem-fueled kaiju at bay, the secret guardians huddled together in a trench. Bulletproof was shaking and angrily using his suit material to duct tape his severed hand back onto his stump, cursing up a storm. She chopped it clean off. "I need that. Do you have any idea how much this is gonna suck? I'm gonna beat this gray-haired space bitch to death with my own amputated fist." Best Tiger stepped forward, ejecting a spent magazine and sliding a fresh one into his Desert Eagle and said, "I suppose I should wrap this up." He pulled out a second Desert Eagle, checking the chamber. "Time to step up my game," he muttered and just strolled nonchalantly in the war zone. The team charged back into the fray to gang up on her. "Hit her with everything," I yelled, firing up my boots and flying back into the mess. Wolfman, still feral, had finally stopped howling at the massive full moon and leapt 20 feet in the air. He brought his claws down in a ferocious, moon-crazed cross-slash that actually managed to tear through the back of the alien's skin, drawing a deep spray of blood. "Take her legs," Business Baby squeaked, pointing a tiny, impeccably manicured finger. Big Mildew roared, his gelatinous green body surging forward. He absorbed a brutal, rib-shattering kick from the alien, but trapped her leg just long enough for Knockout to step in with her punching gloves heating from friction. "Batter up, space bitch," Knockout screamed, delivering a jaw-cracking uppercut that sent the Viltrumite reeling upward. 4. Kid Thor chimed in, swinging his enchanted hammer like a golf club. He caught her in the air, smashing her directly into Hail Mary's waiting, razor-toothed maws. The kaiju's jaw bit down hard, its chemically enhanced jaws actually cracking Viltrumite bone before the alien blasted her way out with a shockwave of pure rage. Angered by the swarming pests, the alien violently whipped her bladed braid, slicing one of Hail Mary's massive tentacles clean off, the appendage hitting the ground with a wet thud. Only to be followed immediately by another swing, aiming the bloody blade right for Best Tiger's neck. But the bastard didn't even flinch. He just raised both guns and fired simultaneously. The first custom-made round hit the flat of her blade, violently altering its trajectory. The second round hit the braid midwhip, creating a perfect pivot point. The momentum she generated turned against her, forcing the razor-sharp blade to snap back and slice cleanly through her own hair. Her most lethal weapon fell to the dirt as the braid was cut off at her waist. Taking the opportunity, I sprinted forward, firing my boots to maximum thrust and caught her falling blade, then, jumping off of Big Mildew's bouncy belly, I launched myself, aiming a killing cut right for her exposed throat. But as her severed braid unfurled, her thick, gorgeous locks of silver-gray hair cascaded down around her shoulders, framing her face in the moonlight. Her full beauty finally graced my eyes without the tight updo. Her full beauty finally graced my eyes. And I stopped dead in my tracks, the blade halting an inch from her neck. Just surrender, I said, my voice entirely lacking the necessary threat. She looked like she'd rather eat glass than surrender. But she glanced at the rampaging Hail Mary, the regenerative and moon-buffed Wolfman, and her own severed weapon. The damage was too extensive. She was bleeding heavily from Wolfman's slash, her breathing was ragged, and dark purple bruises blossomed across her ribs where Kid Thor and Knockout had struck. Not to mention all the chemicals flooding her system from where Hail Mary's teeth had penetrated. She cocked her hands, ready for a mutual kill move. Don't be a hardass, accept my peace offering, I said, casually flipping the blade in my hands to show off my veteran skills. On Earth, we have a saying, make love, not war. It was a throwaway line, a joke as I signaled the team to round up for another gang up. But surprisingly, instead of attacking, she stared at me. Her eyes dragged up and down my completely naked yet undamaged body. Make love, she asked, her tone entirely clinical. I believe that is the human code for mating. Not really, but something like that. She nodded slowly. Then, to the shock of everyone present, she grabbed the collar of her uniform and violently ripped it apart. The fabric shredded, falling to the forest floor, leaving her perfect, bare body illuminated by the pale moonlight. What the hell are you doing? I stammered, genuinely flustered. And I do not get flustered. Seeing as your species is genetically compatible with ours for reproduction, she stated matter-of-factly, entirely devoid of modesty, and you possess this absolute invulnerability, a trait that would strengthen the Empire's genetic stock. I have decided you are the best human male to mate with. We will produce the most powerful warrior for the Empire. My jaw hit the dirt. I glanced back at the team, and they too were absolutely frozen in shock. What the hell, man? Bulletproof screamed, holding his hastily taped stump. We're fighting for our lives and he's spitting game. Kid Thor quickly clamped his hands over Knockout's eyes. Don't look, babe, it's indecent. I can make my own choices, sweetie. Knockout yelled, aggressively prying his fingers away. Business Baby just sighed, pulling a tiny silver flask from his tailored suit pocket and taking a long swig. I even saw that arrogant bastard Best Tiger subtly lifting his blindfold to steal a peek. I could do better, he muttered, taking a drag from a cigarette he'd somehow lit mid-battle. I fell to my knees, once again putting my hands together and looking up at the night sky. God, I whispered, tears of belief and salvation pricking my eyes. You finally threw this old soldier a bone. You are too damn good to me. I finished the prayer by kissing my fingertips and pointing them at the heavens. I stood up and turned to my awestruck team. Big Mildew was desperately using his massive hands to cover Business Baby's eyes. It's all right, guys, I said solemnly, giving them a soldier's final salute. I'll take one for the team. No, for the goddamn planet. Are you done with your primitive rituals? The alien asked, crossing her arms impatiently. Let me at least get your name, pretty lady, I said, strutting toward her. Pretty, HMPH, if you must know, it is Thula of the Viltrum Empire. And yours? Thula, a beautiful name, I grinned. I'm Brittany, but people call me Brit. Now come here, sweetheart. And then, we went to work. I wasn't about to waste an opportunity that God himself had hand-delivered to me. Not to mention, I had to be on my absolute A-game. Humanity's survival depended on it. Behind us, the rest of the Secret Guardians were reacting to the horrifying reality of what was happening. Kid Thor in Knockout immediately asked Cecil to be ported back to base, looking thoroughly traumatized. Mildew was straight up puking in the bushes. I thought Wolfman, being an animal and all, would understand, but he just kept aggressively covering his sensitive nose. Christ, the smell of Viltrumite pheromones and old man is burning my damn retinas. Wolfman growled, turning his back to the clearing. Thankfully, Cecil was quick to teleport Hail Mary, she might have ruined our fun otherwise. Time became a confusing blur. After locking in and giving the performance of a lifetime, I eventually drifted off. When I woke up, the sun was shining. We were supposed to be in the middle of a dense forest preserve, but there was no forest left. The sheer force of our negotiations had completely leveled the trees for 2 miles. Everything was either crushed into splinters or violently uprooted. Lying beside me in the crater, using my arm as a pillow, was the most beautiful angel I had ever seen. Her gray hair was splayed across my chest, her bare back rising and falling softly in her sleep. I laid my free hand behind my head, looking up at the clear blue sky, a dopey grin plastered across my face. God, I whispered, I think I'm in love with an alien space fascist. 29 comments 0 vote. Blast it, Rex Pav, life always seemed to find a way to kick me in the teeth. The misery began by being born to parents who literally sold me to a government black ops lab because they couldn't afford a basic meal. Life as a government lab rat wasn't fun. It was painful, intensive, completely lacking in privacy, and the only other people my age were far from where I was. Things got better after I met Eve. I wasn't reduced to a government-sponsored bomb anymore, I was a hero. Or, at least, I was trying to be one. I guess this is my karma for trying to be a good person. My hover cycle screamed as I zipped my way toward Upstate University. I could feel this itch at the back of my head telling me that life was going to kick my balls all over again. The night sky wasn't dark anymore. It was painted a churning orange, and the smell of burning asphalt whipped against my face. As we closed in on the destruction, I finally saw him. He was hovering above a burning intersection. A human-looking alien with slicked-back blonde hair and a pristine, classic mustache, matching too close to Omniman for comfort. He looked like the poster boy for Hitler's wet dream of the perfect Aryan specimen. He wore yellow-tinted visors bolted directly into his skull by 2 thick, metallic screws on his temples. But it was his eyes visible through the tinted glass that pissed me off the most. I watched him casually reach down, grab a Twadden bus, and chuck it straight through the roof of a library. There was no anger or grimace of effort, just complete boredom. Something about that arrogant, apathetic stare just rubbed me the wrong way. It brought out that same spiteful, adrenaline junkie rage that made me pick fights with half the new Guardians roster. Kate, Ray, I yelled over the roar of the engines. Jump off, focus on the evac, I'm taking the opener. Kate leapt off the back of the cycle, splitting into a half-dozen clones before she hit the pavement to cushion her and shrinking Ray's fall. I cranked the throttle to the absolute max, feeling that familiar, chaotic hum of molecular instability pooling in my hands. I surged my powers through the handlebars, charging the entire mass of the hover cycle until the metal began to glow a furious, unstable orange. At the last second, I bailed and tucked into a roll on the concrete as the supercharged bike slammed straight into the Viltrumity's chest. Kaboom! A blinding sphere of kinetic fire engulfed the entire campus block. The shockwave was so massive it shattered every window in a 3-mile radius. People who'd been hiding in buildings got thrown from their feet by the concussive force. I stood up, dusting myself off with a cocky grin. But as the smoke cleared, the grin died on my face. The alien was just floating there, casually dusting a patch of soot off his pristine white uniform. He looked down at me, his bored expression unchanged. Pathetic, he muttered. TCH. I wanted to continue with the assault, but the team wasn't the same since the Battle Beast incident a week ago, and it showed. Kate and I were the only ones who made it out of that meat grinder in one piece, well, mostly in one piece, considering Kate's clones. It was all thanks to that lobotomy John Kaisen, who was apparently secretly working with Cecil the whole time, who patched us all up to be able to do this suicide gig. But the mental scars were still wide open. Shrinking Ray had voluntarily taken evacuation duty, the sheer terror of nearly getting shattered alive had broken her frontline nerve. Robot, usually a cold, calculating machine, was noticeably shaken. He overcompensated by coordinating the evac while actively throwing his metal body in the way to keep Monster Girl out of the direct assault. With us tied up here, the GDA was stretched thinner than a wire. The comms were a mess of panicked chatter. Every D-list psycho was using the alien invasion as an excuse to riot. America was burning. Robot, who the hell is holding the line out there? I yelled over the chaos. Is Mark back? Negative, Robot crackled. Cecil gave the new recruit full autonomous authorization. Pepsi Man is currently neutralizing 34 concurrent outbreaks. I blinked. The walking vending machine. I tuned into the main GDA frequency for a split second. Instead of hearing commercial jingles, I heard rolling sonic booms, followed by the wet, sickening crunch of aluminum caving in skulls. I started. Fucked, Kate finished, one of her clones looking as disturbed as I felt. The world was ending and a corporate mascot was out there turning domestic terrorists into paste. But I didn't have time to dwell on it. Right in front of us, hovering above a burning intersection, was the real problem. Black Samson, though, he was a completely different animal. Turns out, getting your powers back wipes away that, powerless boomer, bitterness. The old Samson would have played it tactically. This new Samson, he dove straight out of the sky like a missile, his eyes glowing a crackling yellow. He slammed into the Viltrumite from above, carrying enough momentum to finally knock the smug bastard out of the sky and into the pavement. As the dust kicked up, a sharp sound suddenly echoed across the campus. Twang! A wooden sliding door materialized in the middle of the street floor. Didn't Kate say they were used by Kaisen's girlfriend? I thought to myself. The gate slid open, immediately swallowing terrified civilians into the safety of whatever bunker was at the other end. First, it was just one gate, but then the frequency increased. Twang, twang, twang. Civilians flooded the gates in panic. Parents carrying kids, students helping each other, blood-covered survivors dragging the wounded. Dozens of them opened up across the campus. Over the comms, Robot confirmed they were opening citywide. The Viltrumite effortlessly punched Black Samson through an office building and paused. As the dust settled, he looked at the wooden gates swallowing up the civilians. So, these are the gates to that nightmare maze Nolan was talking about, the alien mused, tilting his head. And that sound, it must be those witches he kept cursing out. He vanished in a blur, zipping straight toward the nearest gate. Monster Girl and Robot double-teamed to form a massive blockade and protect the evacuating civilians. As the Viltrumite approached, he didn't slow down. He raised his right hand in a chopping motion, aiming a cut right for Monster Girl's thick, green neck. Robot threw his metal chassis directly in the path of the strike. Crunch. The Viltrumite's hand sheared cleanly through Robot's reinforced alloy torso, chopping his head off the metal shoulders. No, Monster Girl roared, throwing a massive haymaker. The alien swatted her away like a gnat and stepped right into the tatami gate. Damn it, I cursed, running to the gate. We knew exactly what that place was. A safe haven where thousands of defenseless civilians were being evacuated to. It was going to be sheep waiting for the slaughterhouse. We froze, terror gripping our lungs at the realization. But a second later, a massive crash echoed from the portal. The Viltrumite came flying backward out of the gate, skipping violently across the asphalt for yards. Stepping out of the wooden frame wasn't a slaughtered civilian but a massive, orange cyclops. He was covered in medical bandages, his chest heavily wrapped, shaking and stumbling as he walked out, but his single eye burned with defiance. You're not killing any more innocents, Viltrumite scum. The alien roared loud enough for the whole campus to hear. The Nazi poster boy stopped his skid, floating back up. He wiped a tiny tick of blood from his lip as his eyes widened in genuine surprise. How dare a measly unopen damage the perfect body of a Viltrum soldier? He yelled, blitzing forward, smashing Cyclops brutally back into the gate. You survived conquest, he muttered as he cracked his jaw. What is that senile old bastard even doing? I didn't care about their alien politics, but he was distracted enough. I grabbed my explosive discs, charging them to the absolute limit, and hurled a barrage at the blonde bastard. Bang, bang, bang. The explosions caved the ground, damaging the cars nearby, but all it did was successfully piss him off. His bored eyes finally locked onto me like a predator. Well, come and get it, asshole. I yelled. I did what I was good at. I broke things. I used everything I could get my hands on. Parked cars, shattered street lamps, the debris of shattered pavement, in a blanket barrage. I hurled charged debris at him like a machine gun, but he was just playing with me. Eventually, though, I saw his eyes change from apathetic boredom to irritation. Hell yeah, I knew I was gifted. But just as I was patting my back, he phased through the smoke, grabbed me by the throat, and lifted me effortlessly off the ground all in a literal second. A loud, irritating insect, he whispered, chillingly close to my face. He grabbed my left arm. I saw Monster Girl and Duplicate rushing him, desperately trying to get me out of his hold, but he just kicked them away without even looking. Then, his grip tightened, and he pulled. A sickening pop echoed in my skull as my shoulder wrenched from its socket. But he didn't stop. As my muscles sheared apart, skin tore like wet parchment, and tendons snapped like high-tension wires, followed by the nauseating crunch of splintering bone. He ripped my left arm, dragging a grotesque trail of severed veins and shredded meat right out of my torso till a few strands remained connected. Ag! I screamed, choking on copper and bile. A violent geyser of arterial blood erupted from the gaping crater, blinding me instantly. The pain was a white-hot pain that completely short-circuited my nervous system. But my brain, wired from years of being a government-bred weapon, trained by the worst of what humanity had to offer, focused on one single, delirious thought. Blast it! My severed arm was still clutched in his hand. I locked my eyes onto it and forced every ounce of my will, my molecular acceleration, into the still somehow connected via vessels, flesh and bone of my own torn-off limb. Bang! The localized explosion went off right in his palm, the sheer, unexpected kinetic force flinging him backward into a pile of crushed cars. I hit the ground, puking up saliva and blood, clutching my spurting stump. I looked up, terrified he'd already be on his feet to finish the job. Instead, a shimmering pink force field snapped into existence around me. The Viltrumite flashed and slammed his fists into it, shattering the construct, but it bought me the clarity I needed to scramble backward. Rex! Oh God, your arm! Eve dropped beside me, her eyes wide with horror. Hey! I choked out, flashing a blood-stained grin that probably looked psychotic. You should see the other guy. The Viltrumite roared, bursting from the wreckage. I finally saw it, a jagged crack running down the yellow lens of his visor. Weird. Before he could reach us, Black Samson dive-bombed again. He grabbed the alien, detonating the pent-up energy in his body with a blast bright enough to temporarily blind us all. When my vision cleared, a mile-wide crater had been carved into the campus. In the center, the alien was holding Samson in a chokehold, wrapping his arm around the guy's throat, slowly crushing his windpipe in midair. No, Samson, I yelled, trying to run forward despite my missing arm. But Eve pulled me back and pointed up. 3 sleek, metallic pods dropped from the sky, slamming into the earth in a triangle around the Viltrumite. The pods hissed open and what stepped out was pure nightmare fuel. They were ghoulish men, sickly pale, with bulging green veins running across their bodies and horrific mechanical implants grafted into their decaying flesh. They launched themselves at the alien in perfect, mindless synchronization. How? I asked, stumbling back. Robot hovered down next to us, awkwardly welding his severed head while somehow carrying Samson. Renaman. They are a secret project the GDA has been working on. Dead soldiers, working for their country one last time, Robot's mechanical voice echoed, somehow sounding grim even without vocal cords. The Renaman were relentless. They didn't feel pain, and they didn't tire. They swarmed him like rabid animals, biting into his face and tearing at his hair. They pounded his chest, driving every strike with a horrific mix of hydraulic torque and whatever nightmare chemical cocktail was pumping through their rotting veins. The sheer, mechanical force was enough to shred his pristine Viltrumite uniform and cave the asphalt even deeper beneath them. Eve didn't waste time as she placed her hands over my bleeding stump. Pink energy swirled, sealing the wound and weaving together a crude, fully functional robotic prosthetic. I'm gonna stop him from decimating them, Monster Girl said, her voice stealing over as the Viltrumite began methodically dismantling the undead cyborgs. We need to pressure him. Just as we prepared to throw our lives away again, the heavy, thrashing chords of Metallica blasted from the heavens. 23 comments 0 vote. Going out with a bang. Just as we prepared to throw our lives away again, the heavy, thrashing chords of Metallica blasted from the heavens. We looked up to see the source of the sound, only to find 2 blue comets streaking down, getting bigger and clearer as they got closer to the ground. As they landed, the shockwave blew the dust clear, and we saw heavily armed, humanoid mechs. Tech Synchros incoming, a mechanical voice announced over the heavy metal track. Eat plasma, space fascist. The larger mech yelled as his hand transformed into a massive energy cannon, blasting a beam that actually pushed the Viltrumite backward. Hey, how many times have I told you we're not using that name? The bigger mech yelled in frustration. But why? We are a team after all. The smaller, sleeker mech replied. Oi, robot, I mocked to take my mind away from the flaring pain. You didn't tell me you had siblings. The mechs turned to me. Their helmets retracted, revealing two very human teenagers. Hey, who are you calling robots? We are full-fledged humans, you know. The big one said. Yes, we are the tech siblings. The female added. Image here, sis, I never agreed to that name either. I believe Cecil has given you the details of the situation, Robot interrupted, ever the buzzkill. The duo nodded, their helmets snapping back over their faces. Yeah, I'm Zach Thompson, and this is my sis, Zoe. We've got orders to deal with Four Eyes over there. The Viltrumite pushed himself out of the rubble, eyeing their armor. How does this backwater planet have Geldarian armor? And two of them? Yo, Vidor, right, Zoe said, aiming her arm at him. I really like your glasses. Wanna trade? Her arm shifted, firing a point-blank cruise missile directly into Vidor's face. Dealing with two coordinated mechs seemed too much for the alien. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, the Viltrumite wasn't the one hunting. He was getting jumped. Monster Girl kicked it off. She ripped the flaming chassis of a city bus right out of the pavement and teed off on Vidor's jaw like it was the bottom of the ninth. The crunch was loud enough to make my own teeth ache, and it actually staggered the bastard. Before he could even spit the soot out, Black Samson was on him, but he wasn't just throwing haymakers anymore. Bathed in that crackling yellow energy, he was a blur, zeroing in on Vidor's joints. Kneecaps, elbows, insteps, anything he could get his hands on while others distracted the alien. He was fighting dirty, trying to buckle the guy's foundation. Vidor snarled and raised a fist to turn Samson into paste, but Robot stepped in. Tin Can didn't bother throwing a punch and instead dumped a swarm of lasers straight onto Vidor's collarbone. That was the opening the new kids needed. Zoe dove in low, her blue, Geldarian, armor whirred as her arms morphed into superheated plasma whips. She lashed them around Vidor's wrists, threw her thrusters in reverse, and pinned the guy's arms down hard. Batter up, bro, she yelled. Her brother Zack rocketed straight up, turning his entire torso into a massive freaking bolt gun. He fired a solid slug that hit Vidor square on his back with the force of a falling meteor. The impact dropped the Viltrumite right to his knees and skidded to the end of the campus. Vidor roared, now totally humiliated. He flexed, his ridiculous alien muscles starting to snap Zoe's plasma whips as he got ready to launch himself. But Eve wasn't having it. She flew overhead, glowing bright pink. Instead of throwing a shield, she transmuted the pulverized asphalt right under Vidor's boots into boiling tar. He sank up to his shins in seconds before she snapped her hands, turning the tar into a solid block of titanium. His feet were locked in and the bastard was finally stuck. And that was the dinner bell for the Renaman. Cecil's three undead cyborgs didn't hesitate. They dog-piled the trapped Viltrumite like rabid junkyard dogs. One locked its hydraulic arms around Vidor's throat, while the other two just sank their metal teeth right into his ears, nose, eyelids or whatever soft tissue they could find. It was glorious. They weren't fighting like heroes trying to put a bad guy in handcuffs. They were fighting like cornered alley cats, using every terrifying trick on this fascist piece of shit without giving him a single second to breathe. I leaned back against the rubble, gritting my teeth as my new robotic arms synced up with my nervous system, recovering my stamina to use my powers again. But I wasn't just lazing around. I was groomed to be an assassin capable of overthrowing governments. So, I watched. I observed the way he fought, the way he moved his head to protect his visor and those weird screws on his temples. The siblings high-fived midair, physically linking their mech arms together to form a gigantic, unified blaster and fired a massive beam that launched Vidor high into the sky, finally giving the team a few moments to breathe. Hey, Eve, I called out, running over to her. Can you use your powers on him? Rex, how many times do I have to say this? She panted, wiping sweat from her brow. I can't alter living organic matter. I'm sorry. TCH, get out of your own head, woman, and let me finish. I snapped, the adrenaline making me abrasive. I'm talking about the visor. It's inorganic, and permanently attached to the inside of his skull. I was cut off as Vidor crashed back down like a meteor. His uniform was in tatters, his skin scuffed and bleeding. His eyes were bloodshot with absolute fury. "You insignificant, mud-dwelling apes!" Vidor roared, his voice booming with enough force to rattle my teeth. "I am an elite soldier of the Viltrum Empire. I have broken entire civilizations more advanced than you. You think your pathetic, measly bunch of tricks can match pure Viltrumite blood?" He ripped a chunk of titanium off his boot, crushing it in his fist. "Nolan be damned, I will raise this miserable dirtball to ash. I will burn every single one of your cities to the ground and make your entire species beg for extinction." But the team didn't give him an inch. Zack and Zoe pressed him hard with their synchronized barrages. Using the distraction, Eve flew up behind him. She reached out, slamming her glowing pink hands onto the sides of his visor. Since she couldn't alter him, she altered the glass instead. She transmuted the inside of the transparent visor into 6-inch, jagged tungsten spikes. Vidor let out a horrifying shriek as the spikes drove directly into his eyes. He clawed blindly at his face, trying to rip the reinforced visor out of his own skull. "Now," I yelled. Robot, ever the schemer, understood instantly. He ordered the remaining 3 Renamen to dogpile the blinded Viltrumite. As they clung to his limbs, biting him into place, I sprinted forward and slammed my remaining human hand onto the metal chassis of the closest Renamen. "Get back," I roared as I accelerated the molecules of the undead cyborgs till their whole bodies were charged up with kinetic energy. Their bodies finally lit up like miniature suns. The team scattered, and Zoe whipped me behind her armor. Barum. The resulting explosion was the biggest I had ever mustered. The shockwave leveled the remaining campus buildings for miles, sending a mushroom cloud of fire into the night sky. When the smoke finally cleared, I saw Vidor finally on his knees. His suit was gone. His skin was burned, blistered, and bleeding profusely. The blast had finally shattered the spiked visor completely. But I saw it, the ear where one of the Renamen had bitten him, it was ripped open, exposing metal. Those screws on his temples were some kind of cybernetic implants connected directly to his visor. While the alien was in a daze, seeing his pathetic condition, I didn't hesitate. I leapt over the rubble, launching myself onto his back and thrusting my finger directly into the bloody, metallic hole right beneath the exposed screw on the right side of his skull. It was maybe less than even a second, but I poured my soul into it. My power wasn't limited to making fire. I accelerated the molecules inside inorganic and sometimes organic objects to such extreme, unstable speeds that the kinetic energy ripped them apart, causing the trademark Rex explosion. I forced the atoms of the metal deep inside his brain to accelerate, building up a catastrophic amount of kinetic potential energy. Pain does funny things to the brain. Instead of just passing out, my fucked up subconscious decided it was the perfect time for a highlight reel of every miserable memory I'd spent my life burying under sarcasm and explosions. I saw my old man's face the day he sold me to the government. Not a shred of regret. Just pure, pathetic relief that trading his own flesh and blood meant he'd finally get a hot meal. Then came the sterile labs. The endless, agonizing surgeries turning my bones and blood into a living detonator. They built a brainwashed attack dog, pointed me at targets, and told me I was the good guy. But the real kicker, the one that still makes me want to blow my own head off. The night I tracked my parents down years later where I was shivering in the dark while I watched the glowing warmth of the fireplace inside their cozy little house. They had smiles. They had 2 new, perfect kids. My sacrifice had bought them the American dream, and there was absolutely zero room in it for a broken, explosive monster. They were better off without me. It's why I obsess over those stupid home design magazines. Because beneath all the cocky bullshit, all I ever wanted was a real home. And Eve tried to give me one. She pulled me out of the dark, gave me my name, even my freedom. She actually loved me. But guys like me don't know how to handle something that pure. I was so insecure, and jealous of anyone who even looked at her, especially Mark, that I panicked. I sabotaged the only beautiful thing in my life. I pushed her away, and blew the whole damn thing up, just because my broken brain convinced me I was too fucked up to deserve her anyway. I shoved the memories down, swallowing the bitter lump in my throat as the kinetic energy flared blindingly pink around my finger. I pushed the memory away. If I was a weapon, at least I finally got to choose where to point it. But I felt something cold and sharp enter my abdomen. I looked down. Vidor had blindly thrust his arm backward, punching clean through my gut. His fist emerged from my stomach, slick with blood, pulling a horrifying mess of my intestines out with it. Rex. No. Eve screamed. No. What? Wait. I heard a cacophony of voices screaming at me to stop. Vidor gasped, trying to pull me off, trying to stop the kinetic charge building inside his own head. For a race used to being invincible, the realization that his own skull was turning into a nuclear bomb shattered him. He thrashed wildly like a trapped animal, a desperate, gargling scream tearing from his throat as the orange kinetic energy began to violently bleed out of his ruined ears and eye sockets, but I didn't let go. I kept my fingers jammed in his skull, the energy glowing brighter and brighter until it illuminated the entire crater. I looked at Eve, tears streaming down her face as I mouthed. Sorry. Image here. I looked at my bruised, broken friends, even those weirdo siblings. I looked past them, at the horizon. The first rays of dawn were breaking over the ruined campus. It was the most beautiful sunrise I had ever seen. I smiled and let go. BOOOOM. Author's note: if you want to read up to 15 plus chapters in advance, check out my P at Trian Max Striker. If you wanna hang out, join my Discord server, web links. To be continued.